This is The Losing Life. The Winning Life, written by Ross. The Losing Life, written by Claire. I think there are more people who can relate to a losing life than a winning life. And that's why I'm a loser. It's about kosen-rufu, world peace, permanent, long-lasting world peace for everyone. In kosen-rufu, no one is left out, not even losers. Okay, here we go. I'm looking at myself on camera, and this is not the way I see myself inside my mind, but this is me. Today is June 30th, 2025, the last day of June. In 2 days, I'm supposed to be declassified, but I really have no way of knowing if it's actually going to happen. And I was inspired to make this video by somebody who titled their video, "I'm a loser." And that's what I am. I'm a loser. I forgot to bring the book out. I'm going to go get it right now. And before I do, I'm going to explain why I'm a loser. We just moved to Hornell, New York, and this is my front porch. And it's a mess. Look at it. But it's a beautiful front porch. I've never had a front porch like this before, and it's beautiful. Up there, some little birdies laid a nest, and there were little birds in here hatching, and I have to refill my bird seed, but I can't afford to do that right now because I don't have any money. I'm totally broke. I have zero in my bank account. I don't even have enough to feed my cats. You know, cats are really hard to feed if you don't have cat food. I mean, thank goodness I found some meat in my freezer. I mean, we don't have much in our freezer, but I was just freezing it in case it was good. It's before we left Augusta, Georgia. It was in January of this year, and we didn't end up leaving until the 4th. And it took us a whole week to get here, 7 days, because we had our brakes failed in our bus. I won't get into all the details. And we had to get some mobile mechanics to rescue us. But before we left, HelloFresh was a subscription I had, and they delivered it right when we were about to leave, and I'm like, darn it, I thought I canceled that. And you know, you can't cancel it once they've delivered it. You can't even cancel it once it's on the way. So I just threw it in the bus, and we left with it. And you know, it was a very cold journey in January, and it froze. It remained frozen, needless to say. And I finally thawed out the chicken, and it was just fine. It was out in our bus all winter, frozen. And then as it started to thaw out outside, you know, I finally went into the bus, or I had my husband Dean go into the bus to rescue it. And it was thawed out when I threw it into the freezer. Actually, it didn't come frozen. It actually is just cooled with that special ice that's all smoky and weird. Black ice, is it? And but it was kept very cold. It wasn't frozen cold, but it was cold. And yeah, when I got to it, it wasn't, you know, it was getting warmer out a little, you know, when things were thawing out. And it was cool because we never opened the box, so it was still kind of cool to the touch, I guess. And you know, I hadn't realized it wasn't frozen. See, that's probably what, I don't know, it's probably why it turned out so well. yeah, so yeah, I immediately froze everything, hoping they were okay, but not really knowing and not really wanting to thaw it out to find out it was spoiled. But I had no choice yesterday because I had nothing to feed my cats. I was thinking my cats would eat a lot more things than they are interested in. You know, their cat food has lentils in it, but they won't eat lentils. Well, one does. Well, a couple do, but it's just not their first choice, and they just don't like it. They won't eat rice and beans. I've seen them eat rice and beans. They won't eat my dog's dog food. Well, I see that they are eating it if they have to. They have nibbled at it very slowly, but they don't like it. They do like mac and cheese. I know this is not like the best for cats, but I just don't have a choice. I don't get paid until Thursday, my Social Security. As it's SSDI at this point because no state will supplement it anymore. It started off as SSI for a diagnosis that was false back in 1993 was when I didn't get it till 1994. I think I applied for it in 1993 and they gave it to me because they thought I had bipolar disorder. And a doctor at the time, my doctor at the time, you know, I was going to the county mental health place in Santa Monica. They wouldn't diagnose me with anything. They thought that, you know, I mean, I had depression, which they thought was definitely related to all the trauma I had been through, you know, SA. But they wouldn't diagnose me with anything like that. And they warned me. They said, you know, these drugs are really powerful. I mean, you don't want to just take them if you don't need them. Anyway, my boyfriend at the time convinced my doctor. He invited my doctor over with the false pretense. You know, I thought my doctor was cute, and I'd tell my boyfriend, oh, he's so cute, da, da. And he went and told the doctor that I thought he was cute, and that if he came to my house, that I would like do something with him. Like, and I'm like, you know, that's nothing I would ever do. I had a boyfriend. I was devoted to my boyfriend, but this is what my boyfriend did behind my back. And I'll tell you who my boyfriend is in a minute. In a little while. I was gonna run in and get this book to show you though first. He invites him over, you know, for sex, you know, and without my knowledge or consent or permission. I don't do that kind of stuff, you know. I not a pea. But this is what he did. And, you know, of course he D'd me, you know, so he thought I wasn't conscious. And I wasn't. I mean, I didn't immediately remember it, but I was semi-conscious, and my eyes were open, and you know, it took me a while to remember, but, you know, I eventually remembered. And he came over and he took one look at me and he immediately left. You know, he had taken off all my clothes, and he's like, she's not awake, you know, she's D'd. And he refused to, you know, do anything. You know, if I was a willing participant, I guess he was willing to, but he was not gonna R me, right? So I have to talk like this. It's, you know, YouTube, I don't want YouTube to penalize me. That's how I got my diagnosis, my false diagnosis, and got on SSI in California, Los Angeles, well, Santa Monica. And all this time, I'm still on it. It's 2025. That was I applied for it in 1993, got it right after the murders in 1994. And I've been receiving it all ever since. And it only amounts to a little under $1,400 a month, but I don't get, like, I only get $1,000 a month because they penalized me. I once shut down my Medicare, trying to get off disability, you know, and preparation for getting off. And I did make a lot of money for a while there, but they didn't cut me off because I have 9 months where I can make money over their limit, and before they kick me off, I have to prove myself for 9 months. And I did. And then right when the 9 months happened, you know, I no longer had the income. You know, that was very carefully arranged, I guess. And for 7 years, I guess it was back in 2017, I cut off my Medicare and, you know, trying to get off everything. They wouldn't do away with my hospital. They can't do that. And this is before Social Security came up with a rule or some kind of law or regulation that if you don't get on Medicare when you're supposed to, that you are penalized for every you're not on Medicare when you are qualified to be on Medicare. And this is a new law. I guess it's a law that went into effect in 2019. And I cut off my Medicare in 2017, 2 years before. And I swear somebody created this law intentionally, knowing what I had done. I swear to God. And then when I finally got back on it, you know, I got breast cancer. So, you know, I couldn't pay for my surgery without insurance. So I was forced to go back on it. And of course, I'm penalized. What is it? I guess I'm penalized. I'm trying to remember how much it is. It's like a lot of money. It's like for every year you're penalized $100 or something. No, it can't be that much. Thank goodness it's not that much. I have 7 years. So, and I should be receiving almost $1,400 a month, but it's like 13 something. And I only get 1,000. So it's like maybe $350 altogether. 7 into 350, that's $50 a year. Yeah, that must be it. And when I moved to New York State, they no longer made me pay a premium for my drug coverage. Thank you, New York State. Yeah, like Georgia was. And I never paid it because I couldn't afford to. I think I still have to pay it. They're still after me to pay my monthly installment that I had to pay for the drug plan in Georgia, but New York told me, we're not going to charge you. Okay, we're going to let you slide on that. Thank you, New York State. I don't know. I guess if I started working and making the kind of income that would kick me off of it, I would be immediately kicked off. I wouldn't have 9 months. You know, I used up all my 9 months. But yeah, as soon as I make over their limit, and I don't know what it is. It's something like $1,300 a month. Maybe it's the equivalent or almost the equivalent of the income I'm supposed to receive. But I only receive $1,000 a month, okay? And I'm dependent on this income. It's really, you know, it's really hard to get off, especially in my situation where I'm being harassed and laws are changed to harass me. You know, I know maybe people think that couldn't be true, but it is. In my case, it is. Okay, let me get this this book I'm talking about. Hold on just a minute. All right, I'm back. By the way, my great-grandfather built this house. And my grandpa grew up in this house. And there was a person who, you know, is a little dilapidated, still is. And somebody did a lot of work to this house, and we really appreciate it. That's the only reason we're able to live here. Still a lot of work to do. And this used to be the front door right here. Right here. Right there. You can see the line there. See? That's where the edge of the front door was. And now it's on the side because there's a couple who moved in 1917 who I think they were the ones that renovated, and they made, you know, it used to be this was the kitchen, the everything room, you know, dining room, kitchen, you know, back then they had fireplaces. I don't think it had electricity. I don't think it had water. I don't think it had any bathroom. And even though there were some homes that did in those days, but it was built in 1900 when not most people didn't have those things. I believe the Flanagans, you know, the main family house in Wellsville did. They were builders, and that's how my great-grandfather learned how to build this house. They did, but my grandpa was trying to give my grandfather a new start here in Hornell. You know, his girlfriend got pregnant with my great-grandpa, with my grandpa, when he was only 17, and they were Catholics, and, you know, I think that it was a real thing calling people bastards back then, and I mean, my mother grew up saying that word all the time, so I think it was really common in this area to harass people who, you know, and call them that name. And I think that my great-grandfather wanted a new start for his son, you know, because he married the woman, he got pregnant, and she's my great-grandmother, and, you know, there was nothing improper. I mean, yeah, things like that happen. But he married her, and my grandfather was born in wedlock. So I really think Catholics in those days were just a little too strict and rigid. Oh, I just hate the way I look in the sunlight. It shows all my, you know, I'm not wearing any makeup, of course, and I'm 59, almost 60, and yeah, I'm a loser. That's why I brought this book out. I guess I'm gonna have to flip this video so you can read it. Somebody, my business partner, my co-writer, my co-producer, you know, family, he's really like part of my family. He's known me since birth. He wrote this book, this I guess it's not really a book, pamphlet. It's so outstanding. If you ever want to pick it up, you can go to, you know, SGI-USA.org and go to the bookstore. There's a bookstore. Just find the bookstore on the site, and you can find this. It's only $1, I think, right? It says $1 on it. Yeah, it says $1, and it's such a great investment for $1. I mean, it is beautiful. It's such a, every so often I have to reread it, and it was just recently I reread it, and I just can't even get over what a beautiful piece of writing this is. I did this design here on the cover. That's my design. I co-wrote a lot of stuff, you know, in the SGI. I wrote a lot of stuff myself too in the SGI. A lot of the stuff that people read even to this day was co-written or written by me. I mean, I was one of the writers. But I'm a loser today. I don't get credit for anything I've done. You know, everybody officially the SGI just wants to like throw me away. They just want to pretend. They want to erase Buddhist history. I mean, can you imagine doing that with Daisaku Ikeda, who is my genetic father? You know, just like delete his true hit. Well, they kind of did. You know, he was born in the U.S. He was born in America. My grandmother, my grandma ELL-iott, gave birth to him in he was born in 1928, and she was 12 when she gave birth. It was secret, and this is what they did to young girls back then. This is what the CIA did with women, young girls who were in certain lineages. Yeah, she was 12. She was just about to turn 13. Daisaku Ikeda was born on January 2nd, and my grandma's birthday is January 12th. So 10 days after she gave birth, she turned 13. And then Daisaku Ikeda was shipped off to Japan to grow up in a Japanese family. I guess they were, I don't know, didn't they process seaweed or something? They were, you know, he was from a humble humble beginnings in Japan, is what I understand it as. But yeah, he was born in Knoxville, Iowa. That's where my grandmother lived. If I'm not mistaken, she might have lived in another little town outside Knoxville. I know she grew up in a certain town right outside Knoxville, but you know, the hospital was in Knoxville. Probably Knoxville is a suburb of Des Moines. So yeah, I believe he was born in Knoxville. And it was, you know, she was young. She was not married yet. She didn't get married until quite a bit later. And then her firstborn was my father, Dennis Wayne Elliott, Dennis W. Elliott, who the Queen, her younger sister, gave birth to. But my father, Dennis, was Ruth. My grandma's first name was Ruth. He was her genetic son, and so he was shipped from, you know, the CIA did this, so it's all legal, you know. He was shipped from England to Iowa, Knoxville, Iowa, to grow up as Ruth's firstborn child. Firstborn son, you know, she only had 3 sons. Yeah, so yeah, and both Dennis and Daisaku Ikeda were my genetic fathers. I have more than one father. I mean, I have like 20 some fathers. I'm not even sure how many. And I know that sounds really wacky and crazy, but it's not. This is top secret. The CIA, you know, has top secret technologies. There's all kinds of things they keep top secret that they don't want civilians to know, the people to know, you know. And, you know, there's a whole, people talk about aliens and UFOs and everything they think they know is, I don't know if it's the case or not. I just know that there is, you know, there are alien, there are other worlds. And my grandmother, my grandma Flanagan, who was married to who married my grandpa, who grew up in this house. They lived in Wellsville, where the Flanagan family was based. And she was from a place known as Vega, which is, and I know this sounds really like wild, Vega is a location, is inside the sun, okay? And yeah, well, how is that? Yeah, we don't have technology. Our technology is not advanced enough to understand how that is possible, but they do have, you know, people from Vega come down here all the time. People from Earth go up there all the time. I mean, it's only certain people who are allowed to do that. I had the privilege of going up there a number of times because I've been killed a number of times. I've died many times. I don't even know how many. It's like so many times. I thought that was just the sun. And so, you know, because Vega, that's what they call themselves. It's actually what we refer to as heaven. Heaven. And yeah, I was allowed to go to heaven many times, but I had a mission here on Earth, so I was put right back. And that's why I'm here today, speaking today, because I was put back in my life by heaven again and again and again. They intervened because I couldn't die, right? They couldn't. My mission is too important for me to die. However, the SGI does not agree. The SGI believes that I am an abomination. I don't know what they think. The SGI is the organization that published this particular booklet that is so wonderful. We gave all our writings to the SGI. It's the World Tribune Press that, that published this, and that's, affiliated with the SGI. World Tribune Press, that's SGI-USA, okay? And we gave them, I gave them my whole life, and, as a child, I was a child prodigy, and I wrote and co-wrote so much, and I gave it to the SGI, and this is the way I'm treated, because a 30-year-old leader who was one of the first American members in this country, just wanted to have a daughter to replace me. I guess he wanted to, I guess somebody gave him the idea, told him who I was. I'm the first all-American fortune baby born in the United States on October 21st, 1965. And his name is Larry Shaw. I call him the master of delusion because he spreads delusion. He makes everybody delusional. He creates mass delusion in our organization of the SGI. And he's the guy, and he AR'd me. He had the YMD came to my house in 1975 on more than one occasion, prior to the bicentennial celebrations. We were planning a big event, a big festival in 1976. And in 1975, everybody was practicing and rehearsing, and I was part of that. I was supposed to be the little girl in This Is America. I was re-shakabuku by Wayne Green a couple years earlier when I was only 7 years old, and so that would have been like 1973 or something. It was in the spring, and yeah, in 1974 we were rehearsing a lot then, but I believe that we co-wrote ABBA's Dancing Queen in 1975. I believe. I could be wrong. Maybe we co-wrote it in 1974 when I was 8 years old then. I'm sorry, little babies. Little birds are not wanting to eat what little birdseed I have here because I'm scaring them away. I'm sorry, babies. I need to refill it though. Yeah, my mother shut it down when my mother, was she was actively drinking at that time, and, when she drank, it was kind of like her gateway drug to other things, and she'd pop pills when she got drunk, and so she wasn't in a state to protect me, and she'd wake up and get sober, she'd wake up and, I don't know, she'd realize what had happened, she'd remember, and people would tell her, and yeah, she shut everything down, and of course she accused the wrong person. She accused this guy who had nothing to do. Well, he was there documenting everything, but he wasn't an active part of my abuse. He's really like one of the best friends I have. Anyway, my mother shut it down. She was part of it. She was there, she was abusing me, and she was there. She knew what was happening. And it took her a while to shut it down, even though she remembered what was being done. She just, I don't know, it just took her a while. And yeah, and this is how this guy was removed from my life forever. And You know, that had happened to Daddy many years before, thanks to my father, you know. Daddy, when I speak of Daddy, I'm talking about a guy you know as Clint Eastwood. He's very, very old. I know he's gonna stick around as long as he wants to. But yeah, that's my daddy. He's the one who raised me and taught me everything I know, and operated through, you know, the guy. This is Ross, that is the guy I'm talking about, Ross Dryblot. And Daddy, he was removed from my life when I was 5 years old, moving, you know, when we moved cross country. I was born in Mountain View, California, lived in Los Altos, then moved to Palo Alto, and then we moved to Lexington, Massachusetts, so my father could go, you know, get his MBA at Harvard Business School. He had gotten his degree, his master's at Stanford, and, you know, he was on to bigger and better things. And it took him so long to get his master's at Stanford because he was working full-time for Sylvania. And when he got his MBA at Harvard, he just went, studied full-time and got it done in a year and a half, so he could go on with his life. But as a result, we really struggled financially, and we're just kind of living off the money from the sale of our house in Palo Alto, and it was really tight for a while until he was done, and then he got a position in New York, you know, with RCA American Communications, and you know, that was most of his career. And you know, we first moved to Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and then we moved to Princeton, New Jersey, when they were building a new office in Princeton. And I lived there, you know, and Princeton's where I lived when I turned 18, and that's where I left home and went to New York. But anyway, getting back to Larry Shaw. He's really a guy I don't know all that well. He's just a guy who was 30 years old. He had been studying psychology in college, whatever college he was going to. And I think, you know, as I recall, he had just gotten his bachelor's, or he was just finishing it or something. He was not a doctorate, you know, he was not a doctorate student yet or in grad school at all. And he's the person, I guess he was working for NSA. I mean, that was the name of our organization. You know, at the time, we were Nichiren Buddhist of America, NSA, but clearly he worked for the more well-known NSA, which National Security Administration, because he came to my house when I was home alone. Our family friend Stuart Humpert was there with him, and he forced me to sign many documents, which he yelled at me, and don't look at them, no, and he was covering them up. I'm like, don't worry, I won't look. I really thought he was trying to help me. Oh, I didn't know that they parked over there. Oh, so some neighbors park over there. Oh, interesting. Okay. You know, I've told this story so many times. I'm so tired of telling it, but I'm just going through it because it needs to be told. I just thought he was trying to help me, even though he had AR'd me, you know, with a whole room full of YMD, you know, YMD, Young Men's Division. These guys were in their early 20s. He was the oldest guy in the room, and, you know, he was their leader. And he literally rode me like a cowboy when I was on all fours. It was disgusting. He obviously struggles with erectile dysfunction, and somehow I, you know, was able to unlock that, and he was so excited. He was, everybody was cheering him on as he was riding me like a bull. was horrible. And today he labels me delusional. Behind my back, he claims that he is my doctor, and then I'm some schizophrenic, and I've never been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And what I struggle with is post-traumatic stress disorder, PST. Well, I don't really struggle with it as much now. I've just always I've always struggled with depression more than anything else. And I still have remnants of depression. I mean, I feel like I'm a little on the depressed side these days. I've been a little on the depressed side for a while because my life sucks. Like I told you, I'm a fucking loser, if there ever was one. I mean, my life couldn't be, just imagine, put yourself in my position. If I had achieved all of these lofty things and done all these things, and I mean, there's so many things I can tell you about, and so tired of telling my stories and everybody thinking I'm crazy. Yeah, this is how they keep my life top secret. Yeah, you either, and they made me choose in the 1970s when I was a kid. Okay, do you want to be crazy, or do you want to be a liar? Which I'm like, I don't want to be I'm not a liar. I would never want to be a liar. And they said, well, then we're going to have to label you crazy. That means it's delusional is what they call it. And we have to do that to keep you top secret. And I was like, why? Why do you have to do that? And I've really struggled with that my whole life, well, not my whole life, but in adulthood, especially when I've started to speak my truth. And they told me, as soon as I remembered everything, that I had the right to speak my truth. My truth. My truth. I hate that. It's not my truth. It's the truth that they don't want anyone to know. They always said that I can speak freely, that even though I didn't have, like everybody else was bound by security clearances if they knew the truth, but I wasn't. I could speak freely because it was my life, and because I have the authority to do that, I guess, I don't know, being the person I am, being born into the life I was and am in. This was supposed to be my loser video, though, because I don't have anything that I was supposed to have. I don't have anywhere near what I was supposed to have. I don't have the life I was supposed to have. But this was by design, because my grandmother, who is from Vega, didn't want me to have everything too young. She didn't want me to be spoiled like my mother. And my father, by the way, she didn't think, I don't know, she loved my father. She had an issue with her daughter, her adoptive daughter, who was my mother, because I don't know, my mother was spoiled, and both my parents were spoiled brats. Everything was just handed to them, and that's why they were terrible parents. I was horribly abused my entire life and deprived, and this continues to this day, and I'm about to turn 60 years old. Yeah, and I'm supposed to be the very first official all-American fortune baby born in 1965. Yeah, so getting back to Larry, he wanted his daughter, his future daughter. He wanted a daughter, and he wanted that daughter to take my place. And, as I said, so he forced me to sign these documents, and I signed them thinking he was trying to help me, even though he had AR'd me, and yeah. And then he went to the other side of my house, went to my kitchen. I was seated in the living room, and across our dining room and foyer, he would yell certain questions that I couldn't really hear. I didn't hear what he was asking me. And they were strange questions that I didn't understand, like, what are you talking about, kind of thing. And my family friend, Stuart Humpert, was over there with him, telling him the answers. But I guess Stuart needed to like yell and make sure from me, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And he was like, okay, yes, you said yes, right, Claire, you know. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And, you know, so I could better hear him, he moved to my father's den, which was his office, on the other, you know, like closer. It was off the dining room, but closer. And, but I still couldn't hear him. And I don't know why he didn't just like sit in the same room, because he didn't want me to hear what I was answering and, you know, what he was answering for me. He just wanted to create this fake profile of me. I don't know. And obviously, you know, he was studying psychology and, you know, some psychological profile maybe. Maybe he was trying to, you know, this is how he gave me some kind of fake diagnosis. I don't know what he was doing. And it was for the purpose of labeling me a threat to national security, I guess. And I'm a 9-year-old girl in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, mind you. And so, and you know, when I was told what had happened by signing those documents, I was told that, yes, I was labeled a threat to national security, but that my people, the people who protect me, were happy about that, because that was the only way they could properly protect me, because they couldn't tell my parents who I was and all the money and assets that I had. So this was the only way they could protect me and my money. I have never been protected. I don't care what anyone says. I have never been protected. The person Claire has never been protected. The money Claire has, you know, they had to pay out, you know, they had to pay people out to leave my money alone. But it has been protected. It's just the person hasn't been. The person has been killed many times and tortured again and again, and is still being tortured. I am still being deprived of my life, of my birthright to this very day, and told by the SGI that I don't exist. I don't care what you say. If you're gonna force me to sit, to fit into a little tiny box as a little tiny member in a, you know, in a district, and force me to forget all that I went through, all the years that I've been alive, okay, and just treat me like a new member, that is saying that I'm dead. That is the equivalent of saying I'm dead and that I don't exist. Because I can't pretend that my entire life and everything I've experienced hasn't happened. Yeah, there were many years when I didn't remember everything that happened. Yes. And you know, I remember when back in the 90s, when I first started chanting again as a young adult, I had no memory of ever being born into this organization or chanting ever. I just thought I found the greatest thing on earth. And it just was the most natural thing in the world to chant. The organization was my dream come true. You know, that's how I felt. And one of my leaders put it, I was like a fish taking to water. You know, yeah, obviously I had chanted before. I mean, I didn't have any memory. I really didn't. My family covered it up. They didn't want me to know. You know, it was all some top secret. And I encountered all the people who had abused me in 1975, including Larry, and of course my boyfriend, who I told you about, did that with that doctor and got me falsely diagnosed. I'm sure Larry, he was operating in conjunction with Larry. And this ex-boyfriend, he's my ex-boyfriend now, and I guess, you know, we got married on paper, but I don't really count it because, you know, it was just on paper. It was just for business reasons. It was just so he could get some money, which he never got. I mean, I hope he never got it. I don't think he did. I don't think my father wanted to give him one penny. David Craig, he's the guy who really killed He's the true killer of Ron Goldman, and his partner in crime is the true killer of Nicole Kidman. Oh my God, Nicole Brown Simpson. And you know, Nicole Kidman. That must have come out for a reason, because I came forward as the real mother of all 3 Jackson children, you know, that TMZ, I don't know, that TMZ, I put TMZ on the map. I know they say, oh, Michael Jackson did, right? Michael Jackson was there. They broke the Michael Jackson thing, and I guess I was part of the Michael Jackson thing. And I always say, you know, I just never knew about TMZ until they like were the first to break the story of Claire, you know. But yeah, I was not Michael Jackson too. I mean, I don't talk about that a lot, but you know, there are alternate personas. And in Vega, they have technology to enable you to be other people. And they enabled me to be a lot of other people, Michael Jackson being one of them. I was Michael Jackson, and he did boys. And it must have been like one of the first, you know, bodies I was born into. You know, I was an 8-year-old girl, and I went into this piece of machinery like a tanning bed. It was like a tanning bed. It resembled a tanning bed, and I went in it, and they put me, you know, I don't know what they did, and I was put in the embryo who became Michael Jackson. But the whole time I was an 8-year-old girl. So I'm a baby, but I'm really an 8-year-old girl inside. And I'm an 8-year-old white girl. And I hate it. I didn't understand why I was born a poor black boy. You know, he was poor. He was a poor black boy. And I remember as a child, as an 8-year-old girl, wondering, why would they put me in a body like this? Why would they do this to me? You know, and I grew up, and yeah, I became world famous and the whole thing. But yeah, for a while there, I was like, why did they do this to me? I mean, it was really difficult. I was inside as an 8-year-old girl, and I just acted like I was still an 8-year-old girl with these boys. I liked these boys because I was an 8-year-old girl. I'm like, these are cute boys. I want to be with these boys. And, you know, but I had a responsibility. You know, I was only 8 years old, but I was in an adult male body, and I had a responsibility. And, you know, what I did with them was wrong. You know, I was a P. And, you know, anyone who thinks otherwise is very naive. You know, I know he was very convincing and claiming that he wasn't, and that he would never think that way. And, oh, you know, he's just as innocent. He's like a child. Yeah, I was a child inside. And yeah, I was a really good liar, I guess, at that time in my life. I was inside his brain, you know. My behavior was affected by the brain I was inside of, and his body and his brain. I was a liar, and he was a liar. And, you know, shame on all of you for not believing those poor boys who went through what they did, you know. And it's very hard when you've gone through something like that. And shame on the Jackson family. They know the truth. They know the truth. They know how Joe Jackson was, and that whole, they know the truth, and shame on them for trying to cover it up. And, you know, they'll all pay. Everybody pays when they die. If they don't pay in life, they pay when they die. Cause and effect is strict. I don't care. And even if you chant, you can't erase anything like that. You can't erase effects, okay? It's not possible. You can change effects, you can transform them, but they never, you know, they don't go away. They're not erasable, because once the cause and effect are simultaneous. So when you create a cause, you have the simultaneous effect right there together with it simultaneously. In our world, it's like it's like a false, it's like a delusion, you know, that cause and effect occur at different times. The cause first and then the effect later. I've described it like a mirage in the desert. It's false. They occur simultaneously. So if you have a cause, you always have an effect, and it's always simultaneous, and you can't undo that. You can't erase that. Once this is here, you can't erase it. It's like they're together, they're attached simultaneously. But what you can do is transform it, and that is the beautiful opportunity here on earth, because our effects don't always show up right away. We sometimes have some lag time to use to transform our effects, but you can never erase them, Larry Shaw. And this is what Larry Shaw thought he could do. And he, you know, he's had a lot of time to transform the effect of what he did to me. You know, he's only complicated it worse because he's told more and more lies to cover everything up. You know, he's abused his authority in the organization and in society. He's supposed to be some trauma expert, you know. He's a PhD psychologist now. He didn't get his license until 1980, 5 years after, you know, 1975, when he was diagnosing me. He was no licensed therapist at that time. He was not licensed at all to diagnose me at all. And, you know, first of all, you know, when you diagnose somebody, you're supposed to have a conversation with them. I never even had a conversation with him until I think I figured out it was 1999 when I finally confronted him on all the lies he was telling people in the organization behind my back. I mean, a licensed psychologist telling people he's my doctor and telling them my diagnosis, like that's, I mean, how can that be? I mean, he's not, he was making up a diagnosis. He wants everyone to think that I'm delusional and I'm some schizophrenic or something, and that is so ridiculous. And what a horrible slander that is, to commit against the one and only sole official All-American, very first All-American fortune baby. I mean, and he's trying to erase the effect of doing something like that to me. And the effect, I mean, there's so many things, so many horrible crimes he has committed against me, so many unethical things he's done against me. I mean, it's crazy to think that somebody who chants Nam-myoho-renge-kyo and believes in the law of cause and effect and says, I'm devoted to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound every day of his life, right? It's crazy to think that he thinks that he can, like, use the law of cause and effect to get the effect he wants, like erase the effect he doesn't want. I mean, this is what he thinks. He thinks he can surgically remove the effect of it. He can make any cause he wishes, and then he can surgically remove or erase the corresponding effect that is simultaneous. So what Larry Shaw has done is dig this huge, vast grave for himself. And yeah, the Gohonzon, you know, we Nichiren Buddhists, we chant to Gohonzons, which are scrolls that are the clear mirror of our Buddhahood. And our, you know, everybody is a Buddha. Everyone is a Buddha. Everybody has the potential to be a Buddha. You know, there are 10 worlds in Nichiren Buddhism. And, you know, the lowest world is hell, and the highest world is Buddhahood. And, you know, there's many in between. And each world has the potential for Buddhahood. You know, you might be in the world of hell, suffering, and believe me, I've been there so many times. And this is why I'm a loser, okay? Because this is the, you know, I have to say, I mean, hell is like, is a lot of my life. My life has been a lot of hell, but somehow I find the escape route. I find the exit into Buddhahood again and again and again. And that's the true test of Buddhahood. You know, if you can find that Buddhahood joy, you know, it's in every world, no matter what, how much you're suffering, what world you're in, you know, and worlds, they're figurative, you know, they're like your life condition is what they're talking about. Like, you know, what's your primary life condition? Are you suffering and agony? You know, that's hell. And I've been there. I mean, I spend so much time in hell. But I always find that exit door, the little Buddha door. And there's every other world in there too, you know? There's, you know, okay, so it's hell, hunger, is an animality and anger and humanity and heaven and I don't know where I know there's learning and realization, bodhisattva, which is the only path. You can't be a Buddha without being a bodhisattva. You know, you have to be a bodhisattva to become a Buddha. There's no other way. And that's why, you know, they call it the two vehicles, learning and realization. You know, people who learn things and then have these realizations about life, about everything. You get stuck in that little trap there. It's the two vehicles, you know, because it's all about you and your own realizations. You're not really engaging with the world. You're just engaging in your own mind and crediting yourself with your realizations and what you're learning, and you're not really helping anybody. And you get trapped. A lot of people in those worlds, you know, a lot of people who think they're really smart and learned, and they get blocked, and they think they're Buddhas and they're not, you know. They get very judgmental, and you know, it's all about them, and you know, and that's like the biggest block to Buddhahood. I think that hell is how you get into Buddhahood the fastest, probably. Being in the world of hell, that puts you back into Buddhahood faster than any other world. So it's great fortune to be in hell, because it's like the fast track way to Buddhahood. And you know, the bodhisattva door is right in front of it, you know. There's no Buddhahood without bodhisattva, which is when you put others ahead of yourself, you know. When, you know, it's kind of, you know, think of Mother Teresa, and she chanted, by the way. Okay, so my people were happy that Larry committed this crime against me and humanity by labeling me a threat to national security, because there was no other way to protect me. And then fast forward to 1994. I was going out with that guy, you know, I mentioned, the ex-boyfriend, David Craig. And I had met him. He was the only one who didn't R me in 1975. I mean, or at least one of the few. He was one of the few, because I think there were a couple other guys who refused, but in one evening he was the only one, and it just had such a profound effect on me. And I had seen him in the World Tribune, and I was totally obsessed with him as a child. And then later in life I encountered him, and it was like a mystical experience, and I didn't know why, you know, but he immediately recognized me. I mean, by then I'm a grown woman, but he did a double take when he saw me. And yeah, he was so unattainable. Everybody wanted to go out with, you know. He used to tell me that he chanted to be like God. He told me this when and he confessed all his crimes, and told me he chanted to be like God, and for all the women to go crazy over him, to treat him like God. He chanted for that, and that's how it was. That was my experience. Like, I was like, oh, and I was the one that broke through and went out with him, and it was a huge, vast achievement. But I was terrorized and tortured by all the other girls and boys who wanted to go out with him. Yeah, this is what happened in the SGI. It's really hard to explain. It sounds like high school or something, and it really was like high school. It was like I was Cinderella or something. And yeah, I really am Cinderella. I really lived the life of Cinderella, not having very much, being surrounded by my animals. And I have my prince. I have my prince Dean, you know. We've been married for over 10 years, going on 11 years pretty soon. But I still don't have my life, you know. And Dean has been by my side. He's my best friend. And when nobody else has been there for me but him. I don't even have a family. He is my family. And that's my prince. But I still don't have my life, and hopefully that's going to change in a couple days. July 2nd is Ron Goldman's birthday. I didn't mention, I wrote a book. He did not do it. I'm about to unpublish it because I need to revise it. So by the time you see this, it probably won't be available for you to read for free like it is right now. People have had much time to read it, and they haven't. Like I told you, I published a book. It was from many, you know, okay, so going back to 1994, I was, David was somewhere else, absentee boyfriend, you know, running around town, and I was all alone. And while I was all alone, a waiter named Ron came into my life. He was just a friend. He was a friend of my crazy roommate. And I won't get into all the details, but he started coming around. And he became, you know, him and his friend George, we became friends. And I didn't know I was being R'd by way of date RDs. I don't know if that makes sense. DRUGS. And so Ron was getting, you know, closer to me, and I didn't know why, you know, because I didn't have any memory yet. And he wanted to marry me, and I told him, you know, I was committed to David, and they arranged for us to get married without me knowing that it was for real, because he didn't think that I would be willing to marry him for real. And this is why they conducted a pretend marriage ceremony that was for two romantic friends about to go out to dinner on Saturday, June 11th, 1994. And at this point, I had kind of gotten to the point where I was close. I had gotten close enough to Ron, and we were talking about getting married possibly. And I didn't understand, you know, I was almost there. I was almost agreeing to get married. But I hadn't officially agreed. You know, he had proposed many times, but I hadn't officially said yes yet. But this night changed my mind, and it was the final straw that I needed, and I was ready to say yes the next morning. But what had happened was, you know, it was a marriage. It was a wedding. It was for real. Our friend George was actually a rabbi, and I didn't know this. And I remember him handing Ron a piece of paper, and he said, "This is how much money you have, Claire." And he gave it to Ron, and Ron gave it to me, and I'm like, I don't want to, I think he gave it to me, and I'm like, I don't want to see it here. And I gave it to Ron, and he looked at it, and he didn't look like he was shocked or anything, but I was scared to look. He looked, and he probably told, well, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, it was at the end of the ceremony that occurred. And then Ron borrowed George's fancy sports car. I believe it was red, and he drove me to the Mezzaluna, and we had dinner and wine, and it was so lovely, and he introduced me to his friends there. And then he took me all over Los Angeles to different locations to meet all of his friends who were waiting to meet me all over Los Angeles. It was one of the most romantic evenings of my life. And of course, at this point, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna let David go. I think this is the man for me. He just romanced me off my feet, you know. And then he stayed over. I was deed without my knowledge or consent, because he was used to doing that, and it was something I apparently was used to but didn't know I was used to. And I had given up my room to one of my fellow students from Columbia University. She was a law student at the time, and she had a manic episode when she visited me in Los Angeles, and I had to take her to the hospital and all that. And I wanted her to have my room because I wanted Tiffany gone, you know, at the time. That was one of my roommates, and I had her take my room because I was going to take Tiffany's room later. And so I was sleeping on the couch, and, you know, I remember Ron was really upset about this and that I didn't have my own room. And, you know, we were out in the living room on the couch. But I was out, you know, when whatever happened. And then in the morning, you know, I wake up and he's naked. I'm on the couch I didn't realize he was on the couch spooning me. And then he stands up and he's naked, and I'm like, and he had the most gorgeous body I'd ever seen, and then he asked me to marry him, and I'm like, okay. It was just like I couldn't say no at this point. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yes. And anyway, and then he kissed me, or you know, but I didn't kiss back because I said, no, I gotta break up with David, you know, before we do this, you know. And then he went off to get he had an appointment to get breakfast with George, who is actually this guy. And then they were going to go get guidance. He was going to go get guidance at the annex, the SGI annex. And meanwhile, I was going to call David. I knew he wasn't going to pick up his phone, so I had to leave him a voicemail message, breaking up with him and explaining how I was going to get married to Ron. You know, well, he's been running all over town. This is what happened, you know, and then told him I was about to make his dream come true. You know, and then Ron came back after his guidance session and after other things that he was doing, and he's back at my house, and he's rushing because Nicole is on the way. It's the last chance she's gonna have to R me, and everything happened, and then he has to run to get to work, and she has to run to get to the recital. And after they leave, David and Michael show up, and they see that I've been R'd and I'm unconscious, and my fellow student from Columbia, Sophia, who is still recovering from a very serious, severe manic episode and is on medication and is not quite herself yet, that she's telling David that Ron is a waiter in Brentwood, and she doesn't know what restaurant he works at, but that's where he went to work. And so David's like, okay, come on, let's get him, let's go get him now, you know, look at what he did to her, and so they rush over to Brentwood to track him down, and the first restaurant they walk into is the Mezzaluna, of course. It was the center of Brentwood at the time, and David and Michael had spent time in Brentwood, and yeah, it was the right restaurant. They hit it first try. And Ron had a cell phone in those days. He was the only person other than George who I knew had a cell phone, and my father, Dennis Elliott, always had a cell phone in those days too. Well, he had one of those clunky ones from the old days. This was later on. And so Ron calls me from the Mezzaluna, you know, from work, and tells me that David's there. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you know, that's not like David. He's, you know, and he says, oh no, he's, you know, he's really happy for us, Claire. You're just being paranoid. I'm like, no, you don't understand. David would not be happy for us. You know, I haven't seen David for months, and he shows up at the Mezzaluna, tells Ron that he's happy for us, and, you know, they're buddies now. And oh, it was like, oh no, Ron fell for it. He really was quite naive in a lot of ways, and I was trying to tell him, no, David, that's not like David. You know, he's setting you up. Oh, you know, I could hear Michael giggling in the background. It was a disaster, but Ron didn't believe me. And then at the end of our conversation, he was talking to me. You know, he kept calling me all night, and at the end, he had just gotten in his truck, and he had a truck. He did have a vehicle, and everybody, you know, I can't even believe that Detective Lange is trying to pretend that Ron walked to Nicole's house. I can't even believe it, because he was there at the crime scene. He knows that Ron had a rust-colored truck, old pickup truck he had gotten not so long before. You know, he used to be without a car, but he had a truck at that time. And Detective Lange is trying to cover up the whole Ron thing, because he called my house one time asking if Ron had a girlfriend. Tiffany picked up, told him that she was just Ron's friend, and assured them that Ron did not have a girlfriend, and that's it. And then they never called again. And so they wanted it to be OJ. They just had to put in the call just so they said that they did, I guess. I mean, his whole phone record, I mean, he was calling our house continuously that the last night of his life, and I was the last person to speak to him alive, other than the murderers, you know, other than the killers, the true killers. It's not like he's trying to cover up his incompetence. He's just trying to cover up what he did. He wanted it to be OJ, and they thought, and I do now believe he might have helped plant some evidence, you know, at the crime scene. I know that he didn't plant any evidence at OJ's property. I believe it was at the crime scene. I believe. And I didn't really put that all together until like this last year. It's not incompetence. He was going to make sure it was OJ, even if it wasn't. He just had to follow up and call our house one time so he could say, oh yeah, I called there, I ruled that out. There were all these calls, continuous calls to our house. And the fact that he never showed up at our house, never questioned any of the people that lived at this house other than Tiffany, who said what she said. She said, no, I'm just his friend, no, nothing. That was the link. The last call he made was like minutes before he was murdered. And that person, you need to talk to that person, not just ask if somebody's a girlfriend or not, or if there is another, if he had a girlfriend. That's all they asked Tiffany, and then they hung up. The call was like maybe 3 minutes long, or maybe not even that, like a minute long. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take long to ask those questions. It might not have even been a minute, you know? I was standing right there as Tiffany was, and she goes, ooh, that was close. Ooh, you know, I remember her like, oh shit, that was close. Wow. So in 1994, George Ross, he's FBI, and I was up for declassification in 1994, but at the time I didn't know why I was classified. I didn't have any memory of my past, and very few memories, and I couldn't even remember Ron at the time after his death. I like, my brain just edited him out because I couldn't handle it. That's how I dealt with the trauma. I mean, everybody else could remember around me. I mean, when we were watching the chase on TV, we were watching it with David, the true killer, and everybody knew it was, you know, David had really done it, and, you know, I was the only one that didn't know, and everybody was, I was the only one that didn't know. When the news came over the TV, that the murders and stuff, they're like, oh my God, you know, they all knew. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who's Ron? I mean, that it's unbelievable to me today that I could have ever like isolated that in my mind, because I had only known him a couple months, and it was just easy to go back to being David's girlfriend, you know, and just editing that whole 2 months out. That's the way I dealt with the trauma at the time. And the FBI told me I was their star witness, but I needed, you know, 20 years to heal. And they said everybody needed 20 years to heal. But I was their star witness, so they really needed to make sure I could heal. You know, I needed to heal before, you know, because I was their star witness. So there were all these court hearings all summer that I wasn't part of course. But I remember George would come back and report to me, and he said, okay, you know, he started off with 20 years. Oh, everyone needs 20 years to heal. Okay. And then he's like, okay, 25. He came back, 25. And then it was 28. 28 was it for a long time. 28. You're 28 years old, Claire, to now. It's going to be 28 years. Okay. That's better. And 29, 30, he's like, at the end, it was the end of the summer, it was September, I was moving to Los Feliz. 30 years, Claire. George said, I'm sorry, I did the best I could, but it's 30 years, we have to wait 30 years to be declassified, is what he said. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I didn't really understand how this would affect my life, you know, of course, because I couldn't remember anything yet. And last year it was 30 years. We had gone over what day, what day would it be? George didn't think, and it's Ross. George is Ross, okay? He didn't think that the murders would be a good day, something so violent that ruined so many lives. He didn't think that would be a good day to declassify me. We needed something more positive. And we thought about my birthday, October 21st. Yeah, but you have a twin and you have a triplet, and it has nothing to do with them. Okay, what's a good day? And then we thought, Ron's birthday. And George was saying, Ron's birthday is very soon after the murders. And it's a positive thing. Let's do it on Ron's birthday. And I agreed, okay. And in my mind, when I could finally remember everything, July 2nd, it would be July 2nd of 2024, right? Doesn't that make sense? But the catcher is, Larry classified me on July 23rd, 1975, okay? So the problem is that Ron's birthday, July 2nd, fell before the date of July 23rd, July 23rd. So it wasn't going to be 30 years. 30 years was going to happen July 23rd, right? That year. But I wasn't going to be declassified until Ron's birthday occurred after my declassification date. So I really thought last year that was the year. That was when I was going to be declassified. I was so 100% positive because I could finally remember the day. I finally remembered my classification date. That's a lot to remember. And, that was 50 years ago. And I was able to remember it. And July 2nd, I was so disappointed. I published my book in time for July 2nd last year. He did not do it. Ron Goldman's Top Secret Widow finally sets the record straight is the name of the book, which I don't believe you can read for free anymore, but you can pre-order it. And I'll make sure it's in the description somewhere. Okay, so pre-order it. It's gonna be I'm gonna revise it and bring it up to date. Okay, because there's some information that's not current anymore in there. Yeah, so I was really disappointed last year, and I really began to wonder what the hell was going on. And then Trump is elected, and nothing is possible with Trump. So I just really lost hope. I've been really struggling, and I really had hoped when I got up here to New York State, which is where my grandmother lived. I live in Hornell. She lived in Wellsville. Hornell is where my grandfather grew up. I really thought that everything was going to happen when I got up here. I was thinking it was Georgia, and yeah, I do believe, it was Georgia too. I still think that, but it was just recently that I realized, oh my goodness, it's Ron's birthday this year, because this is the birthday that falls after my classification date last year. Now, 1975 was 50 years ago, and July 23rd is going to be 50 years. I was told it's July 2nd. Now, if nothing happens on July 2nd, I'm just going to be waiting for July 23rd. We did not talk about July 23rd. We did not want to make that the day. So I really do believe that it's happening in a couple days. And there's a part of me so in denial right now. I'm just so used to it not happening. I used to think it was 20 years, I'm going to call him Ross, okay, because that's his real name, okay? His name, he used the name George. He was Ron's best buddy at the time of his murder. Ross, he told me different things at different times. It's kind of like a memory experiment to see when I remember what and when and how and all that stuff. It's been a very long memory process for me. And he told me things in different ways. It's all an experiment. I'm a savant, so I have very incredible long-term memory, and I have no disability associated with being a savant. It was because of me that they dropped the idiot in savant. I have no disability. Savants are, like Rain Man, you saw that movie. Savants are very, they're even more advanced than geniuses. I was, genetically a genius, but then because my mother, they injected my mother with heroin and she drank gin during our pregnancy, my brain went on overdrive, overdeveloped. That's what happened, and usually savants have areas where they're underdeveloped. And that's my twin and my ex-husband who, I ended up marrying. He's my triplet brother. A story for another day. I ended up marrying my triplet brother. They definitely have disabilities. They're normal, but my twin is autistic. She's on the spectrum, high functioning, but on the spectrum. And I believe my triplet brother, my ex-husband, has what is it called? A hyperactivity HD, what is it? He's hyperactive and can't focus. What is that called? HD, I don't know, HD whatever. I'll put it on the screen. And they have cognitive issues, in my opinion, and others, I mean, they do. They definitely do. Serious cognitive issues. But they're functional, and, they walk down the street, you wouldn't know it, right? They're both, in my opinion, are criminals. Which, I think is a cognitive disability. So they share the same birthday as me, and so we needed to make it a different day because they're not involved in this. They weren't the firstborn. I was the firstborn of triplets, and I was the only baby my mother chose to keep. And I believe that that's all I have to say at this point. I didn't expect to go into all this detail about the murders and Larry, and he has a very famous daughter, Vinessa Shaw, who's a well-known actress model. I'm sure you've heard of her. Well, maybe you haven't. She's not like mega famous like Larry envisioned, because she's an introvert. She enjoys her privacy. She's going through a divorce right now, and I wonder if it has something to do with me. I know that I caused Larry's divorce many years ago. Well, not many. Well, yeah, it's many years ago at this point. Yeah. And I don't know if her husband found out about me and what I witnessed, because he was doing the same with her that was done to me. I think the thing about it, in the 1975, they gave me SEX so I would cooperate. When I got to be a certain age, they gave me DATERDRUGS, and that's what he gave Vinessa. I guess I was told that he was going to use that on his daughter instead of what was used on me, because he thought that I was messed up as the result, and that's why he never thought I was going to survive to adulthood. And so he didn't really consider me to be official, because at that time in the organization there was a priesthood, and his daughter was going to be the official one because the priests weren't going to be part of anything anymore. And I don't know what he's deranged, and he wanted to be the father of this historical figure that I am. And this is why I have the losing life, not the winning life, because Larry labeled me a threat to national security, falsely labeled me a threat to national security when I was 9 years old in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. This is why I'm a loser. And I am a loser. I don't have any friends. When I told my leaders, I'm back with the SGI, I'm back to chanting again. When I told them about all of this, they pretty much just told me that it's not something they acknowledge, and that I can start from scratch and have a new life and just pretend this never happened. Basically, they were telling me that it didn't happen, that, I'm sure they had talked to Larry, And I'm supposed to just accept that and just go about my life. I'm gonna make a video about Hornell. You know, I don't think people truly understand what Hornell means. People say from this moment forward, in English, it has a far deeper meaning than that. And I'll make a video about it one day soon. But yeah, I am a loser. The SGI denies my existence, just like Nichiren Shoshu denies my existence. I am a high priestess. I became a high priestess in 1979 with the death of Nitatsu, the 66th high priest. I was a 13-year-old girl in Princeton, New Jersey when I became Buddhism's first high priestess. And just like Nichiren Shoshu, SGI denies my existence. I have to mention that in 1974, I extensively co-planned the SGI in my living room in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. And I was the first SGI president at 9 years old, okay? Because I did all the work, you know, and with others, with adults. And then my genetic father, Daisaku Ikeda, goes to Guam and everybody nominates him as the SGI president. And so then I automatically became the other SGI president, okay? And I still am the other SGI president, but Daisaku Ikeda died on November 15th of 2023. We're approaching 2 years since his death, and the SGI is denying my existence because they don't want me to tell the story behind Dancing Queen. Dancing Queen, that's me. They nicknamed me the Shakabuku Queen, meaning these are young men in their early 20s. They said that I shakabuku them by having sex with them as a 9-year-old, and they called me the Shakabuku Queen, and we wrote the song Dancing Queen. Only 7, that's when I was re-shakabuku'd by Wayne Green. Wayne Green had nothing to do with this, just letting you know. He did witness. I once answered the door totally nude, and that's when he realized that I was being abused for the first time ever. He had never seen any evidence of it, and he'd been told about it, and he didn't believe it until our family friend Stuart Humpert had me answer the door nude one day. And he quickly excused himself with his wife and went away. That was the first time he ever knew that he found out. Wayne Green was not there. Ross was to document it, and others. There might have been another person that did not participate. There might have been, or a couple people. You know, there were many meetings at my house, you know, but they were always big groups, and there were a couple women. I do not believe, you know, the women didn't always participate. So, you know, at different times, different things happened. And but I was the Shakabuku Queen, and when I showed up in Los Angeles in the 90s, I started chanting again as an adult in 1990. The actual date was February 10th, 1990. The next day was Toda's birthday, and then on February 12th, 1990, President Ikeda came to Santa Monica. I was in Santa Monica. He came to Santa Monica to change the rhythm, to establish the new rhythm of the organization. They called it the New Rhythm. And yeah, right after I showed up and started chanting. And when the guys recognized me or figured it out, because I had the same name, they had a meeting at Larry Shaw's house, and I was slipped one of those SEX, and I was acting the same way, and they're like, that's her, it's the Shakabuku Queen. And I didn't know what was happening. I remember more when they give me the DATERDRUGS than I do when they give me the SEX one. You know, when I'm conscious and it's like the equivalent of ecstasy. And you can't control yourself when you're on a like that. And I couldn't control myself. And I didn't remember. It was like, it wasn't me that did that. And I couldn't remember when I woke up the next day. People were talking about it, the people who surrounded me, and I was like, what are they talking about? No, you know. That's the way I cope with trauma like that. Exit out. It's what I do. Or that's what I did. And I'm sure Larry thought I remembered everything. I didn't have any memory. It wasn't until it took me years to remember even that year, which was when I witnessed Vinessa Shaw being passed around, deed, you know, unconscious, in a group setting. I was also deed, but Larry got everybody to focus on Vinessa and leave me there, you know. He wanted everything, all attention on his daughter, not me, you know. And I didn't understand all of this. I had no memory, and nobody else understood either. I mean, unless they were there in 1975 and recognized me. But that year was, when was that? That was 1991? Yeah, because I started chanting on February 10, 1990. I was living in my van, my VW van, my 1970 VW van, and within months I felt the need to go back and reunite with my ex-husband, who I was separated from, who lived in New York. And my ex-husband, he left his living girlfriend to get back with me, and it didn't go very well. He had met a Japanese girl at his job, and she was from a family that was a Nichiren Shoshu family, and they got me to stop chanting. She had a lot of money, and that was what my ex-husband was all about. And so it was very convenient for me. He was involved with her. He got involved when I was still married to him. And yeah, I came back to Los Angeles after that, and was living in my van again. And but then I got hit by a car. It got me to chant again. And I mean, I had an open fracture, bone sticking out of my leg. And yeah, so that's how I came back to the practice. And that by then it was 1991, and it was that summer. I was 25 and Vinessa had just turned 15. It was when she was just starting to star in movies and everything. She was a big model at ELL-iott modeling. You know, I have a history with ELL-iott, and yeah, so she was connected to my people. She tried leaving home to go to college, you know, Barnard, which is part of Columbia University, the college I went to, and she couldn't do it. I know Larry says, oh, it was her career that got in the way. No, she couldn't survive separate from her family, because, you know, she was so, she chants a lot every day to get through every day. She went through a lot, and she's still going through a lot. She has a very strong practice, and she's a living testimony to Nam-myoho-renge-kyo. I am too, but in a different way, because nobody ever cared about me. You know, she's always had tremendous support everywhere she goes. People worship her in the organization, and I'm just looked at like some fraud or some fraudulent person, some piece of garbage. I don't know what people think of me. They just like, they don't understand who I am. And you know, I was born in 1965. Like, I think I'm 11. Well, yeah, I'm like 10 and a half years older than Vinessa. You know, I mean, my people made sure of it, you know, that she could not be mistaken for the very first all-American official, you know, fortune baby. I mean, they made sure there was more than a decade between us. Yeah, 1976, the first one? I don't think so. Yeah, both my grandparents. Okay, my grandmother was shakabuku'd by King George V. Is that who it is? Her father, her genetic father, came to America to shakabuku her when she was a young girl. Okay, Her husband was shakubuku'd in Japan during World War II when he was in the Air Corps as a photographer. And he shakubuku'd his blood brother, Mr. ELL-iott, and convinced him to marry Mrs. ELL-iott, who he was infatuated with, but you know, she was a geisha, and my grandpa would have married her, but he was already married to Ruth at home, and he didn't know his own wife, Janet, because she was sworn to secrecy. My grandma Flanagan never missed a gongyo. You know, she started doing, you know, she chanted and did gongyos since she was a young girl, and she agreed to come to Earth to help out. And she was placed at a German family in Wellsville. She never missed a gongyo, probably till the day she died. She never missed a gongyo. And she was a fortune baby, okay? My grandpa, who lived in this house, he was a fortune baby too. My great-grandfather was the first All-American to chant in the United States of America in the late 1800s. He was born in 1875. His name was James. He's buried right behind this house in the cemetery back there. And his wife was Catherine. And their top secret baby was Bernard, my grandpa. And they tragically died of tuberculosis. I don't know, probably in this house. And he had two sisters, and Marie and Florence, right? And everybody rejoined the family in Wellsville. The Flanagans, you know, they had a big house on the same street as the Pink House. And the reason why my grandpa had an ulcer his whole life, that's what he died of. He died on the operating table on the same day that somebody I know in the SGI was born, on April 9th of 1952. That was the same exact day somebody was born, somebody I know in the SGI was born in Los Angeles. And I swear that's his reincarnation. That's my grandpa. He died. He was only 59. He was my age. My age. I'm 59 right now, almost 60. In this house, he chanted to the fire, and my altar is where the fireplace used to be. And I put it there before I understood that, oh my God. Yeah, I put it there before I actually put it together. You know, the floor is repaired there, you know, where the fireplace used to be. And he used to chant to the fire, and that's why when he built a house in Wellsville, he built it without. He was the architect and everything. And everybody had a fireplace in their house, even when they had furnaces. But he chose not to have a fireplace because he had stopped chanting. I think chanting reminded him of his parents dying. You know, this life here. This was a harder life over here in Hornell. You know, my great-grandfather left the castle in Wellsville, figuratively speaking, and built this house. And it had, you know, like I said, it didn't have electricity, it didn't have water, it had an outhouse, it didn't have a bathroom, and all of those things were added later. And he was a little boy. When he was born, they lived in the Flanagan house where they had everything. And I think he was 7 years old when they moved here, my grandpa. And I think he always wanted to get back to Wellsville, to the better life in Wellsville. And I think he associated Nam-myoho-renge-kyo with this tougher existence in this house. And that's why he stopped chanting. It was a hard existence. It was tough. And then they had two more children, and you know, two daughters, and then they got sick and they died. And there's actually a virus, or is it a virus that coexists with TB? That it's a stomach virus, and I'm forgetting the technical term, but any doctor out there knows that someone who has been exposed to TB many times has the stomach virus, which causes stomach ulcers. And back in those days, you know, the early 1900s, or yeah, I mean, he died in 1952. He always suffered from this terrible ulcer and had so many operations. They didn't know that it was a virus that was associated with TB, with tuberculosis. You know, a lot of people died of tuberculosis at that time. And both his parents died. His father died in 1910 and his mother died in 1911, and they're buried back here. The first All-American to chant in this country. And it was a Catholic priest who taught him to chant while he was in confession, because he was a 17-year-old boy who got a 20-year-old girl pregnant. She was a couple years older, maybe she was 19. I have to look up the dates, but he was 17 and she was like, I think she was 20. She was a few years older. And she was 21 when the baby was born, and he was 18. My grandpa. I'm talking about my grandpa being born. And this was the family secret. All right, well, so here I am in this old 125-year-old house that my grandpa grew up in until he was 18, from 7 years old until he was 18. He probably was their caregiver at the end, you know. His mother probably took care of his father, and he was probably the only one that could take care of his mother. And the younger girls, you know, they were protected. They were sent to Wellsville so they wouldn't get TB, you know. Anyway, here I am, and I'm a loser. This is the losing life. The losing life. The winning life, written by Ross. The losing life, written by Claire. I think there are more people who can relate to a losing life than a winning life. And that's why I'm a loser. All right, SGI? That's why. It's about kosen-rufu. It's not about cars, money, success. Yeah. No, it's about kosen-rufu. World peace. Permanent, long-lasting world peace for everyone. In kosen-rufu, no one is left out. Not even losers. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up, please. I deserve it. Subscribe if you haven't already. You know the drill. I love you. Thank you.